We're going to get started. But hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Casey. I am 19 years old. I'm from Parkland, Florida. Hi, Elizabeth. And I'm currently a student at Duke University. And Sari and I led the efforts for the March for Our Lives in Parkland over 2 years ago now, which is crazy to think about. And we have since then gone on to co-found a nonprofit, nonpartisan, national student-led organization called Empower the People, which works to increase youth civic education and engagement. And this is my co-president, Sari.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sari Kaufman, like Casey said. I'm the co-founder and co-president of Empower the People. We're super excited to welcome you to the common good, how to empower yourself from your couch. So Empower the People partnered with the Constitutional Rights Foundation and the CAP program. So we've been able to have the privilege with working with a lot of the CAP students like you across the country. So we're super excited to be joining you today, and I'm going to move it to Gracie to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Gracie Rice. I am a member on the CAP Youth Board. I am 17 and I'm a junior at Gentry Academy. That's in Vadnais Heights, Minnesota. And I'm so excited for today. So I'm going to pass it on to Blanca.
Hey everybody, my name is Blanca. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'm a junior and I go to high school.
We wanted to come together because today, in the midst of everything going on with the coronavirus pandemic and our lives becoming increasingly virtualized, at least for the time being, it can often become easy to feel powerless or, like you have a lack of control. I think a lot of us are feeling like that. I've been stuck inside of my house for 2 weeks now, and I can definitely say that I do. And so we're here to talk about how to empower ourselves from our couch.
So we want to make sure this is super interactive. So if you look on the bottom of your screen, like you scroll over our faces on the bottom, you can see that there's a chat box and a lot of you guys are using it already. So we want to be able to use this the whole time throughout the webinar. And you can raise hand like next to the participants, and you can also type in the chat box. So to try it out, we want to know where all of you guys are from. So if you don't mind putting your state and your city. There's a lot of chats coming in. Vadnais, Palm Beach, Minnesota, New York, Michigan. Must be cold. California, nice. All right, so it looks like we have people really from all the way from East Coast to West Coast, North and South. So that's super exciting. Yeah, keep putting them in. I like to see where everyone's from. Minnesota. Okay, nice. So Casey already gave a little background. I'm a senior, and with the coronavirus, unfortunately, a lot of my year has been canceled, and being a senior in high school, which I know a lot of you guys are, you can probably relate to the disappointment of finding out that prom is canceled, and I play lacrosse, so my whole lacrosse season was canceled. And my graduation will probably be canceled, hopefully postponed. But we know that everyone is experiencing some type of disappointment, if it's not just at school, but also being stuck at home. And we want to, again, just bring everyone together and show that we're not all alone, and we can still be connected virtually, which is really exciting. So I'm sure Gracie and Blanca also have their own stories and disappointment. So Gracie, do you want to kind of share what you have had to miss out on too?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, my hockey season was cut short, and we were unable to finish our last weekend of games. Sadly, the weekend of games that we were missing out on was senior weekend and senior night for our senior girls, which they were having a really hard time with it. Also, college visits, showcases, all of that has been put on hold. Rinks, gyms, everything is closed because of, the quarantine and, practicing social distancing. And so the new, normal is trying to implement things at home to, stay on track. And I mean, yeah, it's definitely been a little bit of a culture shock. And I know Blanca has had some personal experiences with it as well.
So I attended the program Youth in Government, and I wasn't able to run for my position because of the whole quarantine. And I also have in my school, we're gonna have SBAC practice, which I was really looking forward to because I really need it.
I know she was talking to us earlier, and just how the SATs and the ACTs are getting canceled, and I bet a lot of juniors are also
Yeah.
On the call.
Connection too is a big piece of it. Like that's like an example of how difficult it is now too to access things because we don't have the same connection that we would have had before. And, it definitely adds some new levels of difficulties. So yeah, so we kind of want to give you guys a minute too, to just take this time and like vent, put it in this chat, say, like, just get it out of your system. Everybody's dealing with their own stuff. Like, just share with everybody what, like, maybe you've missed, what might not be happening anymore, how you're feeling about maybe the cancellation of the school year or any other difficulties you've had to encounter as a result of COVID-19.
Yeah, we would love to hear your own stories and like if it's anything from sports to graduation, whatever it is. Yeah, SAT, yeah.
College chores, yeah, lacrosse, oh.
I'm a lacrosse player. I feel you, Lindsay. Yes.
Yeah, that's a big thing too. Having like access to like help with your classes. That's been something that I've been struggling with for some of my classes at school. I definitely was used to being able to talk to my professors or to like the TAs and things like that to actually get help. And it's like significantly more difficult to get that help now. So that's like a big issue that I know a lot of people have been struggling with.
Prom's a big one. That's especially for everyone who already bought dresses and
Yeah, and Just Peace Summit, of course.
Oh, I'm sorry about your family coming from Sweden. Yes.
Yeah. So we see that there's like a lot of different things that are going on. Everybody's kind of dealing with their own things in their own ways, which is definitely difficult, but it's just a reminder that it's not, like there's a lot of consistency across the board.
Yeah, and that's why we wanted to have this session because, there's also a lot of negatives that are happening, but there's also a lot of positives where we're still able to help our, not just community, but also people across the country. This whole thing is from your couch. So easily at home, if we're able to have the virtual connection, then we can still empower ourselves and still like find a purpose and have some positives. So Casey, do you want to talk about that?
So that brings up the question of how we can find a way to connect without actually being in the same space. And, although we may all be feeling a little separated and distant during this time, there's also this growing sense of unity throughout the country. And, although we may be alone, we're alone together. And some of you may have seen that hashtag trending on social media and things like that. And it really just shows that sense of unity that has been growing. And people are really looking to stand together and do what they know is good for the common good, even if it means enduring some, additional hardships or maybe missing out on some things for like the sake of doing what's best for your community. And yeah, so that kind of brings us to these concepts of individualism versus the common good.
I'll elaborate a little more on the individualism and common good. For individualism, it's like one's prioritization of their own needs and their own well-being. And however, with common good, in ordinary political discourage, the common good refers to those facilities that the members of a community provide to all members in order to fulfill an obligation that they have to care about the certain interests that they have in common. And common good is the benefit and the interests of all, rather than just one's well-being.
Quote from Andy Brack, an editor and publisher of the State House Report. And the quote is, "The notion of common good is built into our country's DNA. Our founding fathers wanted to shrug off an oppressive system and take control of our destiny through a democratic system powered by people. The underlying principle generally was people or king, which would decide how to do this without democracy," which kind of brings the both of the definitions into a little story.
Common good and individualism. The reason why we brought it up today is, well, one, a lot of you guys are government students, so it's important to know these terms, but more importantly, right now, we're facing this. So when we're having to stay home to practice social distancing, we're having to sacrifice some of our individualism in order to help the common good, in order to stop the spread of the disease, the virus. So this actually goes into a really fundamental term that you guys probably maybe heard in some of your high school government classes. Some middle school students might have not heard it. It's called the social contract, and it's basically an agreement, an implicit agreement that we put forth between government and citizens. and we are willing to sacrifice some of our individual rights in order to be governed. So this is like a perfect example where we really see the social contract coming in. A lot of us are following the rules that our government are putting in place and are staying home in order to make sure it's better for the common good. So even though, like before we were all saying in the chat, everything that we're missing out on, in the end, we do see that by just staying home, we're actually saving lives. So the reason why we put superheroes on this slide is kind of seems like corny to say that we're being superheroes, but in a sense, by staying home, we are saving our loved ones and people we don't even know. So that brings me to the next slide, and we're going to show you a video just so you can see the real implications of social distancing. You guys might seen this on like social media on Instagram. I know it's been trending, but we wanted to share it again with you all. So in the video, you can see just by one person stepping out and not catching like the flame, it's like symbolizing social distancing, you're able to stop the spread of the virus. So just like, if you guys are getting upset again about things that you're missing, just remember how important it is that you're staying home, that you're 6 feet away from people.
This also brings up the conversation of, and somebody put in, I think it was Elizabeth, who was saying assistance to all or the at-risk and needy groups. So that's a really important discussion, especially because a lot of the information, I know, at least from my perspective, and I do know a lot of other people too felt this way, that a lot of the information that we were hearing, at least right from the beginning of when all this was starting to unfold, is that the people who were most at risk, and this is still true, are people over the age of 50 or 60 and people who are immunodeficient or immunocompromised, which is true. But, this study, it was a USA Today analysis of this information that was put out by the state health department that reported based off of 19 states that Americans of all ages seem to be equally susceptible to coronavirus infection. And states are reporting cases in every age range, though people in their 50s have slightly more confirmed cases on average. And, although the worst effects are seen in this older age range, you see that the next highest bar is people under 30 years of age, which is pretty much all of us. And I think that that's a really big thing, to keep in mind, especially as things continue to unfold. I know for a while as this was first starting, my primary motivations were also to stay inside, to protect the people who were most susceptible. And as more information is coming out, I think it's really important just to note that we are also in that group of people who are incredibly, incredibly susceptible to not only spreading it, but also seeing the effects of it and, dealing with the effects of it ourselves physically on top of all the other aspects of it. And yeah, I agree. People's lives are far more important than any canceled school trips or disappointment. And I think that that's also something that we're collectively realizing. I think it takes time to kind of get over that first hump, because I know that we all have, those impediments in our head that are kind of difficult to get past sometimes. But when you kind of look at the bigger picture and you look at all the factors that go into it, I think that we can all agree that people's lives come first and the other stuff comes after. But, as long as we put in this effort now, we can get back to, all the other stuff. But yeah, so not only is it, older citizens, younger citizens, immunodeficient citizens, it's also people who are small business owners, working class citizens, people who may not have access to a steady source of food or, a steady shelter, things like that. It affects people in a lot of different ways.
The coronavirus also affects all aspects of people's lives. It could affect people economically, like some parents right now don't have jobs.
COVID-19 affects all aspects of life for people differently, economically, socially. Some parents have lost their jobs, religiously, churches, are closed. People aren't able to congregate in, large groups, and it's affecting several aspects of life. It's getting in the way of the 2020 election, and for some of its aspects, it's in ways that weren't necessarily anticipated. And, this is in the form of education, and then some students' grades are dropping, and, their sports seasons were cut off. So, kind of some of the things, we've touched on, but yeah, it affects everyone differently, and it plays a different role in everyone's lives.
Just going off then, again, we want to make sure this is as interactive as possible, and we want to hear from you. So if you're comfortable, I understand it's personal. But if you guys want to share any stories where, maybe your parents did lose a job or something did happen and you want to share, it's totally okay if you don't want to. But it could be anything from economic, socially, politically, anything that you guys want to share and let us know what is happening. Because what's important is, since we are showing what the effects are of the coronavirus, we want to show that it's not just affecting adults' lives, but it's also affecting students' lives. So if you are comfortable with sharing, definitely go ahead in the chat.
Yeah, undocumented workers is a really big factor in it too. And so that's one of the big things, the things that we listed only covers such, a small range of all the different ways that coronavirus is affecting people's lives. And, we only have so much insight. And I think that what's really important about this conversation right now is, even like, it is a personal thing that we're kind of bringing to the table. But I think that having that conversation, showing people that a lot of times the effects that people, have to face are things that we wouldn't even really think about. Like, for example, exactly what Elizabeth was saying about undocumented workers who work in retail. I think that's not really something that would first come to people's minds, but it's a really, really important part of the conversation. So, it's just about all these factors coming together.
Yeah, the part about domestic violence is also really important. I know that domestic violence has definitely increased, and if any of you guys are like in any situation, there's definitely a lot of hotlines. I've seen like also on social media ways that you can get help if you know anyone, or if you are, that's really important, because you don't really think about, everyone's now in close quarters with each other. Yeah, especially homeless people. Yeah, I think you guys are definitely thinking.
Also, like, going back to this idea of undocumented immigrants, this is a very heavy conversation that, has been pretty prevalent in the US for a long time. And this is one of those moments where you really have to think about the different implications that has. And not only for, just Social Security benefits in terms of whatever monetary benefits the government's going to send out, but also actually having access to healthcare and being able to, like, say they do notice that they're having symptoms of coronavirus, actually going in and getting treated is a really difficult barrier for them to overcome if they, can't afford to actually go in and do that. So that also brings up questions of how you address things like that in a time like this.
Yeah, and also donation chains. That's a good point. We're actually going to kind of cover that in the next section. We're going to go over when we actually start talking about like how you can empower yourself. But yeah, that's a good point. You're right. Like, people aren't able to go donate and really leave their house.
So yeah. Also, the Chinese virus is definitely, like, language like that is definitely something that comes into play, and these elements of racism and, the implications in a greater societal context is also something that's particularly important to note. And I think that also comes down to how we're interacting with other people on an individual level, and the way that we are presenting ourselves and, facilitating these conversations, particularly in times like this, but also all the time. So yeah, I think that that's also another really important thing to bring to the table. So yeah, we're all facing hardships in our own ways, and there's a lot of different elements that come into play here, and to different degrees. But that doesn't mean that we're powerless and that we can't do anything. And we can still help our community and people across the country. And so, what is civic action? I know you guys have talked a lot about this in your classrooms with your peers and your teachers, but essentially it's any individual or group activity addressing issues of public concern, and citizens acting alone or together to protect public values or make a change or difference in the community are common types of civic action. And I know that Gracie and Blanca have both also been actively involved, as individuals and as members of the CAP Youth Board, and have had their own experiences. Yes.
You can go ahead, Gracie, if you want.
Okay. So to kind of, give an example of that, last year for my CAP project, my classmates and I did the topic of school shootings, and we looked into, different aspects of it. We sent letters to government officials with our questions and concerns. So that was an example. Another example of, a civic action could just be, something within your school, challenging something like implementing a, better recycling system, or improving, safety precautions within your school. Anything like that could be examples of a civic action.
Another example could be like for my CAP project, I did it on unequal funding. So what we did was that we compared the funding from schools from wealthier neighborhoods, from funding from poor neighborhoods, and we started like alerting our officials and LAUSD itself. We made surveys to ask students how they felt about it, and we kind of we let our students know what was happening, and that was for us that was a civic action.
Yeah, and it's important, like the examples that Gracie and Blanca gave. You know, a lot of times people think of civic action as like, oh, that's a big word. Like, I have to go to DC and lobby. But that's not the only thing that can be civic action. And actually, the collage that's on this PowerPoint are pictures that you might even be in because it's all CAP students and some of their projects that they've done. So you can tell it's so many different forms. It's presenting an issue that's important, or it's going to like the state capitol and lobbying. So it can be anything. For example, I just hosted, before my school got shut down, a voter registration drive. So that's like a really big thing that you can do, an easy civic action. So yeah, it's important that you don't just think of the word as like too big that you can't accomplish something. And now it's totally different because civic action is taking on an unprecedented form that no one really has experienced, right? How we're going to be like probably suspended for at least 3 months. So how at home can we still have civic action if it's most of the time through our school or extracurriculars or going places like capitals? So Casey has a good list that we put together with some of our ideas on how to literally empower yourself from your couch and what you can do by just being home and joining Zoom calls and connecting with people virtually.
Yeah, and also, Elizabeth, just to address what you were saying too, I think it definitely is a mournful prompt for spurring societal action. But I think also an important thing to note is, you know, it is unfortunate, but a lot of times some of the greatest changes in society happen in times of hardship and struggle. And I think that that's the piece that, you know, comes to the forefront in times like these, because you know, I think that a lot of us, our instinct is kind of just to sit back and hope that somebody else will come in and fix it. But whoever is the person to come in and fix it, you know, has to take that initiative, and it could be you. So I think that's also something to keep in mind, even if it's on a small scale. But yeah, so we kind of came up with our own working list. We put together 3 ideas of, you know, how to empower yourself without leaving your couch. First thing is to encourage your friends to continue practicing social distancing. Like this guy, if you see him with his giant circular thing, I don't even know what that is, but you know, it's like that's probably one of the most straightforward ways to be taking action during this time, and that's probably one of the easiest. And it's super simple. We just want to make sure that everyone's being conscious, because I know that there are still people who aren't necessarily practicing that. And then also, this one is a little bit different also from, I think, a lot of the conversations that have been happening, you know, finding and sharing information on which schools in your community are providing meals for those who need them. A lot of kids rely on the meals that they get from their schools to, you know, have 2 meals a day at least, because they may not be getting that at home. And now with no school, that, you know, brings up an additional concern of where their meals and their food is coming from. So I think that that's also something to look into and share with your community. And then the last one that we have is to educate yourself and explore your I wrote country, it's supposed to be county, your county health department's website for more info on what's going on in your community. So that's where you're going to find probably more specific information that's really relative to you. But if you also want to find additional and more general information, you can head to the World Health Organization's website, which we also have linked below.
If you guys want to go in the chat, we would love to also hear how you guys think we can be empowering ourselves and some civic actions that we can be taking just from at home and on our computers. So if you guys would give about 2 to 3 ideas in the chat. I know some teachers might have made this like part of the assignment on coming today, but like this is also just for us, because I know a lot of people are bored at home and want something to do. And the best thing to do is, you know, be able to benefit not just yourself, but also others. So if you guys don't mind putting in the chat 2 to 3 ideas, and we'll like shout them out. Yeah, like some of it can just be sharing on social media, but try to find like more concrete ideas.
Yeah, because the idea also is ideally after we finish today, we'd like to, you know, using our ideas, your ideas, and the ideas of people who watch this, you know, watch the recording that we're going to post online, bringing those ideas together and really creating this like master list of action items created by youth from across the country. And that's a really powerful thing to see that, and to also be able to have contributed to that, I think is also really cool. So yeah, just things that were not on the list of our 3 things, but, other ways that you think you could make a difference. And I think it could also help just thinking about maybe what is going on in your community, maybe where you see things, that need a little bit extra support, things like that.
And Elizabeth, you made a good point, but what's important is that since like normally we are taking societal action, that we don't stop now. And that's really like, our biggest thing. Even though everything's at a standstill right now, we can still be making a difference, which is super important.
Like even just the small things of like what David said, taping a kind note on a neighbor's mailbox, honestly, like it really doesn't take much. And I think that one of the big things right now is a lot of people are struggling, like mental health, I think is another really big factor that comes into play in times like these, especially when we're all feeling really separated and kind of detached. Just doing small things can really make a huge difference.
Yeah, and taking classes, that's a great one. Right, we have all this time on our hands, so when there's policies that we've been curious about or how they affect different groups, this is a perfect time to learn about those policies. And even like, once you start learning them and you maybe want to like implement part of it in your community if it's on a smaller scale. So things like that. Yeah, sending letters to retirement homes, that's a great one. I know there's I know a lot of people are coming together to pick up groceries for the elderly. So that's like a great thing to be able to send letters, support, and then also providing them food because it's hard for them to go outside.
Yeah. I also think definitely like, I think that, so Karen, about creating fun adventure walks, things like that, I think that's good, but we also want to make sure that anything that we create still has that aspect of social distancing in it, because we want to make sure that in doing so, we're not promoting like any sort of, additional contact that isn't necessary. But I think that finding ways to do that and to get kids outside and moving, because I know I've probably been spending a little bit too much time inside, and I'm working on that. So I think that that's also a good idea. And
yeah, and reaching out also to the disability people. I think that right now, like a lot of people are focusing only on the elderly, but also to help people with special needs. That's important.
Social distancing, it doesn't really mean that you have to stop caring about what you believe in. So like if you think something is pressuring your community, I think making a public service announcement is an awesome idea, and you wouldn't be putting anybody at risk. You could distribute it out through Instagram or TikTok even.
And I think the other good idea is really finding ways to be able to do, the distance assistance and being able to drop off supplies and still donate and things like that without having to necessarily interact with people in such, close quarters as you typically might. I think that that's also a really good thing.
Yeah, and also just like calling your grandparents or checking on your family and friends. And say if a friend asks you to go out and hang out and it's going to be a huge group, that's a perfect time easily to be able to say, let's actually listen to the authorities, and we probably shouldn't be all hanging out in a group. So sometimes that's hard, but it's especially important right now.
Yeah, and I think, Anthony, you also bring up a really good point to translate it into other languages so you can actually, communicate this information with people, because, and also, finding ways besides for using the internet and things like that, as some of you were saying, definitely because not everybody has access to the internet, and that can make it really difficult for being able to actually have access to reliable and steady sources of information. So I think that finding other ways to spread this is also a really important piece.
Yeah, and also, when something positive happens, repost it, make sure, you share that, you spread that, you communicate it with your friends and family, because so much is negative right now, and so much is, getting us, down and worried and concerned. So it's, good to try to find the little things to, bring light to life right now.
John, you made a good point about one way to influence government actions is by doing letter campaigns. So again, this is a perfect time if you have a specific interest in a policy or you want to see something get implemented, perfect time to send letters. I don't know if people said something about healthcare workers, but also sending letters to healthcare workers or giving them motivation. Even if you have a neighbor who is in the health industry, just giving them motivation and confidence.
She created like a whole PowerPoint, and her husband he works in the health industry. So all of our students, all of my classmates, we all put like our thanks, because it matters, because they're the ones in the front lines.
And I know that a girl that I used to go to high school with, whose parent is a healthcare worker, actually ended up contracting coronavirus from his patients because he's spending so much time in close contact, and he ended up not making it. He did not recover, and he literally gave his life to help his patients. And I think that that's a really, really noble thing to also note, and just to think about the risks that these people are taking for the sake of, all of us. Yeah. And also just reiterating what was said in the chat on the point about learning more about policy, you can join CRF on Monday for a webinar focused on that.
Clearly, you guys have come up with a lot of different ideas, and I think just the discussion on different civic actions is really important, and also like sharing with your other classmates and friends. I know a lot of people are bored, but this is a great way to get involved with our society and help people.
Yeah, we want to make sure that the conversation does not stop here, and really, continue talking about this, continue finding ways for us to work together, from our separate locations, but still kind of finding ways to make positive change, no matter how large or small of a scale. So you can continue, like, if you guys want to head over to, the CAP section of the Constitutional Rights Foundation's website, and you can go on the CAP discussion board. If you're not registered, it's very, very quick and easy to register, and, just start talking on there. And you can also go to Empower the People's Instagram, which is ETP Now, and we're going to be, facilitating some conversations on there too. And so just different ways to, keep talking with each other and stay connected. And again, as Sari was saying, if you guys are looking to start these initiatives, which hopefully, you guys will actually put, your feet to the ground and run with some of these ideas that you're suggesting, because they're all really great and could make a really big difference. We're here to support you. It's Sari and myself, our entire National Youth Board, which includes Gracie and Blanca and a ton of other kids who are all awesome and excited and ready and willing to, do what they can to support you.
We'll keep the chat box open for that. And yeah, definitely please go follow us ETP Now, a little plug, and CRF on Instagram, so you can get updates from us and continue to ask us questions and give your good ideas.
Thank you so much for coming.